Is this the most important midterm election ever? They're predicting a record voter turnout, and the outlier that was Trump has largely been removed from the equation, meaning we finally get a referendum on how Americans feel about years of COVID lockdowns, vaccine mandates, riots and civil unrest, the demonization of millions of voters as domestic extremists, the weaponization of identity politics-driven minority groups, runaway inflation and open borders, and the fact that the leader of the free world appears to be in serious cognitive decline. It's not looking great for Democrats, many of whom are shitting the bed. California Governor Gavin Newsom admits the Democrats have been destroyed on messaging and that it feels like a red wave is coming. Some of them aren't taking the prospect of defeat too well.
A historian will say what was at stake tonight and this week was the fact whether we will be a democracy in the future, whether our children will be arrested and conceivably killed.
Vote Democrat or Republicans will kill your kids. What? Oh, and talking about fraudulent elections is a threat to democracy.
Losers will be declared winners by fraudulent election officers.
When you do it, when they do it, it's fine.
Right-wing extremists already have a plan to literally steal the next presidential election.
Okay, conspiracy theorist, but Biden said it's
unprecedented, it's unlawful, and it's un-American
to not accept election results unless they lose, then maybe not. And get this, white Republican women, oh, how dare they, might be considering voting Republican.
I read a poll just yesterday that white Republican suburban women are now going to vote Republican.
Oh no!
It's almost like roaches voting for Raid.
Is that what Biden was talking about when he said he wanted to unite the country? In the generic congressional ballot, there's been an 8-point swing in favour of the GOP since August. Forget red wave, many are predicting a red tsunami. Joe Rogan made an even more visceral prediction.
The red wave that's coming is going to be like the elevator doors opening up in The Shining. That's what I think. I think people are just like, what the fuck are you saying? They're making Republicans.
Betting odds, which are often more accurate than polls, show Republicans with a 67% chance of winning the Senate. They need to gain just one seat to claim victory. The House, meanwhile, is basically a done deal, with Republicans 20-1 on some markets to regain control. Most observers expect them to gain at least 20 seats, and they only need 5, so it's all eyes on the Senate, where the key battlegrounds look like being in Arizona, Nevada, Georgia, and Pennsylvania. Joe Biden's on top form as ever.
Gays and gentlemen.
Gays and gentlemen.
Gays and gentlemen. Well, if anybody think if we were doing it for the first time now in the 21st century, going into the 20th.
What? Strangely enough, though, he made himself perfectly clear when explaining this.
In some cases, we won't know the winner of the election for a few days, a few days after the election.
Or you could just, I don't know, count the votes on the night. I mean, how hard can it be? Brazil can do it, and America can't. Biden's job approval hasn't been above 50% since the Taliban seized Kabul. Prominent Democrats have been maneuvering to prevent him from running for re-election in 2024 for months. And if they take a shellacking on Tuesday, it could spell the end for Uncle Joe. While the same result could prompt Trump to announce his re-election bid days after. It's getting harder and harder to find real hardcore news that isn't skewed by bias, which is why I want to tell you about a new app and website that I've personally been using to help keep track of the midterm elections. Ground News, which is today's video sponsor. Polls show trust in media has plunged to record lows. Americans' confidence in newspapers and television news has cratered year on year, which is why it's more important than ever to have access to as wide an array of news sources as possible. Ground News is an app and website that gathers 50,000 news sources from around the world in one place so you can compare coverage. They highlight the political bias of all the major outlets so you can see if a story is mostly being covered by left, centre or right sources. My favourite feature of Ground News has to be Blind Spot. Take a look at this, for example. CNBC's Jim Cramer recently called for a propagandist to disseminate information about COVID. A shocking story and a comment that left his co-hosts stunned. With Blind Spot's bias distribution metric, I can see that the story has had extremely little coverage by left-leaning news outlets. If you're a news junkie like me, Ground News is the Rosetta Stone for breaking news and media monitoring. Instead of wasting time wading through scores of different websites, it's all there in one place. It's an invaluable tool. Ground News has been a great resource to help keep me fully informed on what's going on with both the midterms and news from around the world. Check it out for free or subscribe with unlimited access at ground.news/p TJW and support their mission to make the news more transparent. And remember, by supporting my sponsor, you support me directly and you get a great product to boot. It's a win-win. Now back to the video. Meanwhile, if the election was about being the most cringe candidate possible, Beto O'Rourke wins in a landslide once again.
For a yellow bone, long hair star, thick in the hips, come get in my car.
For the first time ever, discrimination against white people is now an election issue. Former Trump advisor Stephen Miller is running ads in Georgia, asserting Democrats have embraced anti-white bigotry.
When did racism against white people become okay? Joe Biden put white people last in line for COVID relief funds. Kamala Harris said disaster aid should go to non-white citizens first. Liberal politicians block access to medicine based on skin color. Progressive corporations, airlines, universities all openly discriminate against white Americans. Racism is always wrong. The left's anti-white bigotry must stop. We are all entitled to equal treatment under law. America First Legal paid for this ad.
America First Legal is also running ads accusing Dems of targeting children with dangerous transgender drugs and surgery. Naturally, instead of engaging in actual debate, Democrats are trying to get the ads banned. If you're not allowed to talk about it, you won't be able to oppose it. Genius! Perhaps the hottest toss-up, that sounded wrong, is in Arizona, where Blake Masters is tied with Mark Kelly after a recent surge. A sign that Democrats are panicking is them deploying Obama to go after Masters.
If you were trying to create in a lab a wacky Republican politician, it'd look a lot like this guy.
Yeah, looks really wacky, doesn't he? The same party that hires drag queen performers who brag about their puppy play gimp kink are telling you what wacky looks like. In Pennsylvania, there's a 6-point swing to Dr. Oz over John Fetterman since August. Fetterman only had a stroke 5 months ago and probably should have been recovering at home, not running for office. The swing has been fueled undoubtedly by Fetterman's chronic problem with verbal skills whenever he appears on TV or in debates.
Well, let's talk about inflation, because that's a big concern for voters. What do you think the biggest cause of inflation is, and should the Biden administration be doing more?
No, I just do. I think that simply is also, let's talk about the trillions in massive tax cuts to the corporate tax structure as well. True. You know, trillions of dollars that have added to the deficit. And now they still want to support those as well. True. I think in terms of being very serious about addressing inflation is making sure that those rates are brought back into a line with what they should have been, where they're able to fight the deficit.
I mean, it's really just sad when you think about it.
I think everyone that ever plays football in high school was, you know, at a kind of like a trade out kind of football camp.
But similar gaffes didn't stop them voting for Biden, so is the ability to string two sentences together really that important anymore anyway? The betting odds suggest Dr. Oz and fellow Republicans Laxalt in Nevada and Walker in Georgia are heading for victory. The not suspicious at all attack on Paul Pelosi continues to dominate the pre-election headlines, unlike the attempt on Brett Kavanaugh's life, which was forgotten about after about 2 minutes. Now Senator Durbin insists that free speech doesn't include the right to spread, quote, misinformation about violent attacks. Yes, the party of Jussie Smollett, Russian collusion, and 100% safe and effective doesn't want you to be allowed to challenge their narratives. No, expect your narratives to be challenged, especially if you're going to avariciously exploit the incident for political grist 1 week before an election. Expect to be asked to have your ducks in order when you do so.
The front door was opened by Mr. Pelosi. The 82-year-old did not immediately declare an emergency or try to leave his home, but instead began walking several feet back into the foyer toward the assailant and away from police.
Why not just release the body cam footage and shut all the conspiracy theorists up? Oh no, we can't do that, because asking for transparency is now something apparently Only dangerous conspiracy theorists do. Yes, that's actually their new narrative. While it's now acknowledged that they've been working hand in glove with big tech to censor legitimate content that could fundamentally alter the course of elections, are Democrats about to be slapped around at the ballot box for everything they've done over the past 2 years? Are we going to see a red tsunami or a crimson trickle? What's going to happen next week? Put your election predictions in the comments below.